We can't see you on the screen. We can't see you on the screen, so if you're gonna have questions along our presentation, and I think there's questions at the end of this, but if you want to interrupt us, just do so what you want. First, I want to recognize that John and I are in the city of Burnaby in the ancestral and ceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples, and we appreciate the opportunity. My pronouns are he and him, and we wanted to talk to you about some work that we've been doing in the building trades, and that we wanted to acknowledge that we've been working with the Indigenous peoples to try to find some solutions in regards to what climate is and climate change solutions are, and we acknowledge that they are the key to us moving forward to identifying clean and renewable energy sources and a process in regards to that. So, I mean, we want to talk about an opportunity, and the opportunity that arises from this conversation really comes out of some studies and some work that we've done in the building trades, and John and I have been doing over a number of years, but we put together a report back in 2018 with the Columbia Institute, and we talked about what the potential opportunity for the change in energy sources, energy uses, and energy projects across the country. What would that makeup of energy be? But more importantly, from a construction perspective and from a building trades perspective, what's the opportunity for employment? And if we understand the opportunity for employment, how can we prepare our workforce for that employment? And what are the other opportunities that arises for those that are going to be looking at transition and transitioning from other types of pieces that have been impacted as a result of that? So, though I'm not a fan of just transition, I am a victim of the just transition. I come out of the shipyards, and when they closed down the shipyards back in the 1980s, that transition to employment was not comfortable for a person in their 40s. It was not comfortable for a person in their 20s, and it was unrealistic for a person in the 50s. So we want to make sure that we have a worker solution rather than an Ottawa solution, rather than a legislative solution. So we want to move forward from that perspective. So we think that the construction industry is going to play a major role in reducing the climate footprint to meet the goals of 2030, 2050, and 2080. We're focused more on 2030 and 2050. That allows us to do some planning. We've entered into relationships with training plans across the country so that we make sure that the apprentices that are coming out of the systems have the skills that are needed to participate properly and successfully in low carbon construction and net zero projects. We know that the current system and the current curriculum is not designed to create a climate literate workforce. And we get into what climate literacy means. We also understand the nature of construction. We understand the culture shift that needs to take place. But we want to make sure that it's not only organized to promote a climate-friendly workplace, but also a collective workplace when we move forward. There's a number of performance gaps that we've identified in the building design systems and the workforce ability to deliver. You know, what do I mean by that? I think John will talk a little bit to that later on, but I mean, the performance gaps really are is what specifications are, what policies are, how low bid impacts on net zero. I mean, and then how does that workforce deliver what's being paid for? So, you know, low bid and net zero are the perfect oxymoron when we're talking about climate pieces. You know, the challenge to our sector is to respond. And what we find through our research and our study is that the industry will respond to policy changes. The industry is not going to respond to cost issues. So it's important that we try to overlap that piece in regards to that. You know, and as we, you know, if you can back up just for a second, John, I mean, and as we incorporate climate change into our building objectives, we know that our contractors, our employers, and our construction sector are not interested in doing extra training for the apprentices. So, and that's not new to construction, but we need to make sure that we're not invited to the table, but we actually set the table. So we want to be those that drive this issue, and that's why we're undertaking this project. You know, the construction industry itself must be green if we're going to develop green infrastructure.
Lee, sorry to interrupt. I just want to let you know we're not seeing the slide deck. John, if you've started to share it, do you mind?
Oh, really? Okay, we can't tell on this end. I
Oh, well, that's a shame. I've been staying pretty much to the spiel and behaving.
So I thought it was screen sharing, but it's not showing. It's not showing up at your end.
No.
Not at all, eh?
Yeah, do you want to try again? We changed some settings in the background just to see if that was the issue. So do you want to try and just click the screen share option again and select the file?
Hold on here. That's so I can see everybody now on the screen.
You need to pick up slide share.
So go back. Shots. There's and
Right. That no,
On the
next one's out.
bottom.
right here.
Yeah.
Does that show up now?
Actually share.
Yeah. Are we okay again?
Almost. Hang on.
And
There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
And so go up top
Yeah,
and do the
Yeah, the
full
full thing. Yeah. Just hold on a sec here.
slideshow.
I'm going to do full slideshow. Oh, yeah, back here. Just hold on a second. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's all good. It just sounded like a great setup for the deck. So I think it's perfect timing.
Now, does that come on again or have we gone out?
They got it.
Oh, you're good. It's perfect.
We're good now. Okay, fine.
All right, so let's try to sort of catch up. We were talking about the opportunity. Let's go to the next slide.
Yeah.
And we talked about performance gaps. I talked about how we're trying to respond. We talked about the industry not being green itself, but we want to be green in the infrastructure and the building that pieces that we want to go out. If you go to the next slide, John, we know that our infrastructure and our workers are going to need to understand the higher standards for energy conservation. We also know that the construction sector will need to have a strategy about how we deliver that material to apprentices, journey persons, and others that need upgrading. And retrofits are going to have to require some detailed knowledge about what the materials are, the technologies are, and the methods. And how do we do it collectively among the trades and among the projects and not do our work in silos. We know that the process needs to be more efficient. So we're not efficient in the pieces that we do. We need to practice better controls in our own type of work that's in place. And that if we're going to be constructing new energy from electricity, retrofitting our infrastructures and modernizing the transportation piece and ultimately building low to zero or net zero carbon buildings, that we need to be not just climate literate or highly skilled, but we need to have a literacy of understanding of what the scope of work we're doing, how we do that, and most importantly, why we're doing the pieces that we're doing in construction. So one of the solutions and one of the pieces that we're working with is through community benefit agreements. And community benefit agreements allow us to do a bunch of other things on top of what we're doing. And the big work that we're doing right now is with the BC infrastructure buildings, BCIB.
Yeah.
So BCIB is the community benefit agreement that's doing the infrastructure at the Broadway expansion of SkyTrain, doing a number of different hospitals and some schools. And they've agreed with us to do some piloting of some of the courses that we wanted to include and modify. So we think that the award quality of bids for these projects will be important. We know that in trying to attract people and trying to do that transition piece and trying to manage that, is that we're going to want to attract and include people that are not traditionally found in construction. We know that we want, if we're going to do a just transition, we want all of those opportunities in front of us. We want to prioritize that. We are extremely interested in having a homegrown workforce. We want to get that homegrown workforce, and we want to take a look at how we attract people out of high schools, how we get them to make career choices, and how we make this attractive. You know, I love making a presentation in the schools today. I like to tell them that I'm a mechanical insulator. And I love to be able to say to them, as a mechanical insulator, I install mechanical installations on mechanical systems and piping and vessels. And my 8 hours of work will achieve more than a lot of environmentalists do in a year in the reduction of GHG. There is nothing better to be able to say that to a classroom of people that are thinking about other things. And working in the trades is a good place to start to do that. We then get to talk about fair compensation and work practices and human rights issues and all of the other pieces around that. And we're currently right now with BCIB talking about what that looks like and what climate literacy looks like in their orientation. We'll be doing that as of January 1. I want John to talk a little bit about the project, what that project looks like and where we are with that. And then we'll talk about some of our findings, and then we'll get into the very end of that.
Okay, let me give you a heads up about the project itself that we've been working on. About 3 years ago, working with the Skill Plan here in BC, and also with the Social Research and Development Corporation, we put together a project that sorry here, that would look at ways in which we could introduce climate literacy knowledge into the apprenticeship programs in Canada. And the Canadian Building Trades Union worked with us on this, and they submitted a proposal to the federal government for funding. And this resulted in a 4-year project that Lee and I and these other folks are all working on now in conjunction with Canadian Building Trades Unions. And we're hopeful that the outcome of this project will be that apprentices and other members of the trades workforce will have a much deeper knowledge of how the work that they perform has positive climate benefits if it's done properly, and that the industry itself is going to have to play a major role in Canada's efforts to try and lower its GHG emissions and its energy use. As you, I'm sure, all know, currently the federal government is targeting the reductions to be someplace between 40 and 45% by 2030 and net zero by 2050. These are very, very ambitious objectives. And obviously the industry has really got to come to the plate and actually show what it can do in this regard. But it's going to take a big transformation as well in the industry over time for this to happen. So we have projects, our objectives are laid out, and on the screen you can see what we've identified. We're looking at ways in which we can define what climate literacy entails in the building sector. We've done a fair bit of research around what's been done, for example, in Europe around this issue and in the US, and we also have some folks in Quebec who are working with us on that. We have been also consulting with 14 different trades and the instructors who are involved with trades training for those respective trades to identify what are some of the best practices that are currently in place and what do they think ought to be included in some of the curriculum moving forward to ensure that climate issues are now front and center. And I can say, just as a little bit of background to this, a number of years ago, I went through all the Red Seal standards, and most of you are familiar with that. These are the requirements that you have to be aware of and know when you're going to be preparing for the Red Seal exam to get your ticket nationally. And I found that when I went through 37 of these for the major construction trades, that there at the time was nothing about climate change in them. So this was a gap that we are really anxious to fill. And I have to say as well that very recently, that is to say this past August, the federal government and the Red Seal Secretariat have released a little 2-page guideline, which indicates that from now going forward, the Red Seal program will actually focus on ensuring that it's developing a climate literate workforce. And we see this as really a positive change. We can't necessarily claim any major credit for it, although we'd like to think that we had a little bit of influence in moving the dial forward on the issue. So we can see our project objectives are to identify what a climate literate workforce should look like. And then this feeds into the second objective, the way in which that's going to translate into the actual curriculum. What we have been working on is using some of the research that I and some others have done, again, looking at what's happened in Europe and the US and other jurisdictions, and putting that into the actual curriculum that we're developing. And Skill Plan is playing a key role in all of this now. They're taking our research and then they're developing curriculum modules, which will then be incorporated into the trades training programs across the country. And these modules are being developed in consultation with trades trainers in each of the 14 different building trades that CBTU is representing. And so that collaboration is very important in ensuring that what we're including in the actual curriculum is relevant to what is actually going on in the classrooms when the trades trainers are talking to apprentices and indicating to them what they might be able to do to move forward on the climate issue. In terms of the phases of our project, as I indicated, the first phase was for us to see what's going on elsewhere and also in Canada, and then identify what we think is necessary to move forward on this curriculum development. The second phase is the actual curriculum material that we're putting in place. And Skill Plan, as I indicated, is developing a set of curriculum pieces at 2 levels. One is a general overview of how the building trades are impacted by climate change, and also what the construction industry can do to reduce our climate footprint. And that is for all trades. And then for each of the 14 specific trades, we're developing separate modules so that they'll be relevant to what is being taught in the trades training programs in those respective trades. Now, there's always the issue of whether what you're developing in terms of curriculum actually has any impact. And so part of the project that we're engaged in is using the Social Demonstration and Research Corporation to evaluate the extent to which the new curriculum is actually having some impact. And so they're working closely with Skill Plan to ensure that over time they'll be able to measure what is actually happening in terms of attitudes, understanding, and also what's happening on work sites down the road. And so that's a major part of this project, because we need to show that what we're actually developing is actually working. It's actually making a difference. And then finally, in the last year of the program, we'll be analyzing the outcomes of all of this. And hopefully, we are going to see what we've developed incorporated into curriculums across the country in the trades training programs. So that essentially is those are the phases we're going through. We're currently starting at the phase 3 right now with the rollout and evaluation. Lee mentioned BCIB that we're working with, and we're going to do that in a number of sites across the country as well. So Lee, I'll turn it over to you.
So, John, I think that we've got a couple of minutes left here, and maybe just to capsulize some of the things that would take place, and community benefit agreements certainly are a solution, and we are making arrangements to do that orientation here and to do that solicitation. We're also doing it in Toronto. We're doing it with the Toronto Building Trades, and we're doing it with a number of organizations that have community benefit agreements that are in place in the city of Toronto. It's a great opportunity. This is not just a Made in BC project. This is a Canada-wide project, you know, and everything that John just talked about in regards to how we're doing it and who Skill Plan is, and we should talk about who Skill Plan is because they probably have no idea. The Skill Plan is an organization that arises from the BC construction agreements that provides essential skills, tutoring and program development for curriculum to ensure that those that enter into journey person upgrading or apprenticeship programs are actually successful. We allow them to get to where they need to make sure they have the literate pieces, the math knowledge and science components required to pass the Red Seal training in Canada, which is the tradesperson designation across the country. So, I mean, just a couple of things to finish this off is that we know that in our recommendations that we came out with our report, and it was a lengthy report. And we know that the industry needs to understand the impact of climate change, what that nature of that is and what that is socially and globally. So we want to provide that education so it's not what people generally hear out of the construction sector. We want the construction sector to embrace that culture shift of what's next. We want them to acknowledge that it's taking place and we're part of that industry that where it's taking place. But importantly is we want our tradespeople to understand where they fit and how they work to get together to achieve the goals and objectives. We need to stop working in silos. We need to stop, you know, not doing the work because somebody else needs to put drywall in place or some other gets a priority. We need to make sure that that work is done. We want to make sure that there's a recognition that if we all work together, we get to impact side effects and we get to benefit from the side effects as we see the reduction in carbon emissions. And of course that it's a building structure or building system and each system needs to be organized. So, I mean, that takes us to 28 minutes. We want to sort of wrap up on that. We know that low carbon workers need to learn what sustainable construction is. We know that the health of the population will address the inequity. And we want to recognize that it's the members and our workers in the construction sector are crucial to being successful in the future. We think the construction sector is the solution to get to 2030 to 2050. We don't think that people are going to get there. We have opportunities for those to join us. We want to be that transition piece in doing that because as policy changes, we'll be the ones asked in the front end to start that change into a transition of new clean energy. So that, I think, John, unless you want to add anything,
no,
I think we'll wind down on that.
Yeah.
And if you can take down the slideshow, we can then see everybody else. And I think if I'm correct, Andrew, you're going to run the question period.
Yes, thank you. That was fantastic. I love the story about you talking to the students and making clear what an impact trades can have in climate change. That's a message that we've been talking a lot about. This in a lot of ways that, you know, many jobs can be green jobs that people may not appreciate. So that was such a great example. And also, John, for all that information too about the project. One of the fascinating opportunities for this role that I'm in is to learn about all the stuff that's going on that wasn't on my radar. And one thing we've talked a lot about at the coalition table is finding ways to get this information out, because there's a lot of good work happening. This is a prime example that may not be on people's minds. So thank you for doing that presentation today. I found that super valuable, and I suspect I'm not alone in that. I thought instead of opening up to questions, I'd invite Karen Dearlove, the Executive Director of BCCWITT, to join us. I'm going to spotlight both of you, and I thought we could maybe just have a bit of conversation and dig into this a little bit. And I know this is an important topic for Janet and Stefan as well. So I invite them to join us too for this question and answer piece. But yeah, thank you again for that presentation. I found that very informative.
Thank you. I get excited, as you can tell.
We're delighted to have
awesome.
a platform to talk about what we really care about here.
It's fantastic. Karen, welcome to the chat.
Yes, hi, and again, thank you, John and Lee. That was, again, fascinating work that's going on. And like I think about where we come from in terms of the BC Centre for Women, the trades, and the work we're doing in both workforce development and creating more safe, healthy, respectful workplaces in the skilled trades and construction industry. And one of the things that we have been doing a lot about is looking at how we can help fill the existing labor gap. So it's not just about upskilling all the people that are already in apprenticeships or already in skilled trades, but it's also bringing in, as you mentioned, those new people into this, whether they're people coming right out of high school or people that are changing career paths later in age, but looking at how we can promote construction industry jobs as green jobs and finding ways to be able to say that, you know, this is a career path that could have a lot of value, not just as a sustainable career and a great, you know, great career to grow with and have a family and grow in, but also a career that is helping society move towards this net zero future. And one of the things that we're really looking at is how to get that message to people and really how to kind of highlight, like, as you said, what does a mechanical insulator do? How is that related to working in like in the green industry and green trains, and you know, connecting people to things like electrical work, mass timber framing, making retrofits for buildings. Those are really the key areas to try to say that there are so many opportunities. One of the things that we work on too a lot at BCCWITT is looking at how we can also make these career pathways and these workplaces more inclusive. And I'm really appreciate that you mentioned that on your recommendations, because we know too that for a lot of underrepresented and equity priority people, including women, Indigenous peoples, people with disabilities, newcomers to Canada, racialized people, that the construction industry might not be their first choice because it might not be considered a safe, healthy, respectful, and inclusive workplace. And so that's also part and parcel to making us prepared to move into this future, and having out workplaces that are also not just upskilling workers so that they can be carbon climate literate, but doing a lot of work to create those healthy workplaces for everybody. And so, in you know, talking about inclusion and diversity and equity and what does that look like, so that we do have that workforce for the future to do what we need to do to get into this net zero future. So I think those are kind of the areas that as BCCWITT, we're really looking towards how we can support equity priority people to find out that these are great opportunities, but also so that they can be successful, not just into getting into apprenticeships, but also completing their apprenticeships. There's been a lot of movement made towards increasing representation of women, for example, as apprentices, but the completion rate of women is still much lower than the completion rate of most other apprentices. So also figuring out how we can work with employers, work with the construction industry to not just bring in more apprentices, but also to ensure that they have the supports and resources they need to be successful in their apprenticeships, and that everybody has those opportunities. So that's really those areas that I really see how the work that we're doing at BCCWITT really can support a lot of your project, as well as, you know, we work a lot with BCIB, BC Infrastructure Benefits, and Infrastructure BC on community benefit agreements, and making sure that they're actually effective and not just let's recruit a bunch of people for the life of one project, but bringing actually people into the trades and making sure that they can be successful as apprentices and find welcoming and inclusive workplaces. So those are a few things that we're really concerned about, but also trying to make sure that all of those pieces fit together and that we can find ways to fill the current and looming trade worker shortages, but also make sure that we have workers that know that these are great opportunities. So that's kind of where my piece in terms of kind of where I see the connections and the work that we're doing, and how I think, there's lots of potential out there. But one of the biggest things we worry about is workplace culture and retention of equity priority people in the trades, because that does seem to be an area that is still needs a lot of work. So I don't know if you had Lee or John.
Well said, Karen, and we're very much on your page in terms of some of the issues that you've raised. In our original project application, we highlighted the need to ensure that people who are currently largely excluded from the construction workforce need to be part of the solution. And we see also big opportunities here too. There's got to be an expansion of the overall construction workforce if we're going to meet some of the targets that the federal government has laid out. That provides the possibility then of having a much more inclusive and representative workforce. And certainly in terms of the curriculum that we're trying to develop, that's one of the factors that's being built into it. And as you rightly point out, there are things that we need to do to make the workforce much more welcoming to many people who historically have felt that there wasn't a place for them in construction. Well said what you just indicated.
Yeah,
and Lee has some more comments too.
I guess I know that the good work you're doing with Bryn Burke and the building trades. And I know that you're working in parallel to the programming and stuff like that, and Bryn and I talk about this often. We do not want to be part of just another head count.
Yeah.
We don't want to be part of that. We watched it. I mean, I've sat in the building trades for more decades than I care to think of, and watched some of this take place. We don't want to be part of another government program that counts heads and says, hey, we're successful, see what we've done. The work that we do here at Skill Plan is about successful completion. It's about how do we find the needs for those that need help or need guidance or need a different pathway to be successful, and how do we meet those needs. So we do a lot of work, and all of the work is being done here at Skill Plan around curriculum development to make sure that that's built into everything that we do in all the curriculum pieces that we're doing. And we're mindful that micro-credentialing is not a solution. So if you spend 3 weeks getting a ticket on learning how to install a solar panel, you're not a green worker. It's not a meaningful job, and it's restricted. So we're mindful of what it means to be an electrician and what that component is, what that live panel is, making sure that that live panel is connected properly, making sure it's part of a grid, making sure the electrical components all the way down the line are done. Not just installing a panel and putting in 4 screws. That's not what this is about. This is about real work, real jobs, family supporting jobs in regards to that. One of the things I will tell you is that we're already teaching construction workers across the country on how to do this, whether it's a biomass or whether it's a wind farm, a solar farm, or whether it's district energy, or whether it's the installation of heat pumps. What this component is trying to do, and what we're trying to do, is teach them why. How to do it properly and how it's part of a building system. And then that way we can attract meaningful people to meaningful jobs that will be extended down the line. So we're all over what BCCWITT's doing. It's part of our conversation. It's part of what we're going to do in Toronto. It's part of what we're doing with BCIB, and we are pleased that you are there championing what you're championing.
No, thank you very much. And yeah, and I was just thinking about another point there too, and I appreciate your comments on the micro-credentialing, because that one comes up quite frequently in so many different conversations, but it's not a sufficient answer to creating a real viable workforce for the future. And lastly, I was thinking too, a lot of the times when we look at things like the infrastructure benefits and community benefit agreements, one of the things that I've noticed that they lack is this sense of being able to provide those like real wraparound supports that support people that have many barriers. And that's also like key. As you said, it's not just a head count, but it's making sure that you look at the individual barriers that people may have and obstacles coming from outside of the construction industry and make sure that they are supported right through with wraparound supports, whether it's looking at flexibility for caretakers, whether it's looking at transportation, and making sure that, yeah, that they can be successful. And I think recognizing that different people have different needs as well. And I know that a skill plan, and it's one of the programs that we champion quite frequently, is really good at addressing kind of those individualized needs, but also in terms of training, but it's also looking at how we can make more robust community benefit agreements that include and are recognized that there are lots of barriers that individuals may have that prevent them from perhaps being able to take advantage of these great opportunities in these green construction trades.
If I can just reiterate something that Lee mentioned, we are, in terms of our apprenticeship system, training workers to do what needs to be done on the job. What we're not saying enough about is the rationale, the reasons why, in terms of dealing with the climate crisis, that what they do is going to actually be helpful to our communities and beneficial. It's part of the solution, as Lee mentioned. And that message needs to really be highlighted in terms of the way in which we talk about the role of the construction industry in dealing with climate change. One of the other things coming out of our research has been that public policy is very important in terms of ensuring that we get to where we need to be. And arguably, a lot of the changes that we've seen in the industry have been a reflection of our tougher building codes, a whole range of other regulatory policies that governments have been pushed to actually put in place. And that is very important in terms of where we need to be down the road, because the industry on its own is not moving in the right direction. It needs that kind of shove. It needs that kind of push. And so I think we need to be quite supportive of ensuring that the regulatory framework is supportive of what we want to do on a climate issue.
Yeah, maybe somebody else has got a question. I mean, John and I can babble about this forever. Take my word for it. We could go on for 3 more hours, and I don't think you want to listen to that. And is there questions that we can address?
I did get a question in the chat, Karen, if that's okay, I'll jump in. Question from Tessa Jordan at BCIT. Would love to ask how the new curriculum builds the competencies of folks to collaborate across trades to break down those silos that are contributing to unsustainable practices.
Geez, is that about worker agency? So education provides agency. Education will, the requirements. I mean, at the end of the day, we all do what the boss tells us to do. I mean, let's be clear. And if they're not going to let me exercise the work that I need to do, at least I can understand it. What we're attempting to do, and use my trade as an example, is mechanical insulators. I don't know if there's a plumber on the screen, but I hate fucking plumbers. I really do. They drive me nuts, right? They don't allow me to do my job. They put the pipes too close together. I can't put the insulation on. It's too close to the wall, or some damn thing. Plumbers don't give a shit about me, and so I hate them. So what I want to be able to do is provide that education component that I can speak to the plumbing foreman. I can speak to the other workers on the site saying, hey, listen, I need 3 inches of clearance between those 2 pipes. I need to have enough room away from the boiler, away from it. I need that ventilation system and that ductwork to be dropped down 5 inches. I need that, and this is why I need it. This is what we need to do. We're looking for net zero. So what we're doing is providing those examples across 14 different trades. We're incorporating that into the existing Red Seal curriculum, and we're giving instructors examples of how they can make those connections about why. And it's so important that we look at construction from a building system rather than a silo effect. Maybe that's pie in the sky from an educational component. But I think that if we do this, it allows us to change that culture and that conversation in the workplace and provide a little bit of agency that's not in place today.
I think it's also very important for all the trades to recognize that they're all making a contribution. there isn't just one trade that's doing good stuff, that's the green trade.
Yes.
No, on every project, everyone has a role to play, whether that be an operating engineer, an electrician, plumber, whatever. And they're all part of ensuring that we have either a building or a piece of infrastructure that's built properly and that meets climate criteria. And so it's important that there be a very inclusive approach in the way in which we deal with different trades. And the other thing is to see, as Lee mentioned, a systems approach, that buildings are not just, as he rightly said, a bunch of silos, but rather you have to understand how it all fits together, and then what your trade is contributing to that bigger picture. And so again, we're trying to reinforce that collaborative approach and understanding of what everybody else is contributing as well. Okay.
And by the way, my son-in-law is a plumber, and he gets this all the time, by the way. It's an interesting, conversation at the dinner table.
It was an awkward hosting moment, I'm not gonna lie, but we're through it now. Karen, just before I hand it back over, Coyote put a comment in the chat from Zeke about training new workers is important in regards to equity, but more importantly is retraining supervisors. They are a product of the industry they are in, but they also set what is acceptable to their crew. Without their wholehearted buy-in, any top-down policy won't be adopted. Do you see that, John, as part of the focus in the work that you're doing?
Well, we're not, I mean, for some of the skilled trades end up supervisors anyway. So in terms of our curriculum, to the extent that that's going to impact what they understand about climate issues, that's going to impact what they actually do if they become supervisors. So that's part of it. We really need a cultural change in the industry, and that's got to go from top to bottom. So it's what we can do is make a significant contribution on the trades training side. We can't be accountable for every other aspect of the industry, what the developers do, what the engineers, architects do, but we hope that everyone moves in the right direction, and that we can learn to collaborate more effectively. And again, I said earlier, we need the government to push harder on this issue. The industry does need to change. If there were no pressure from government right now, they just keep on doing what they're currently doing. We wouldn't be trying to meet the climate objectives, but we have to meet those objectives. And there needs to be that push from the industry. So I'm not sure I fully answered your question, because we're not in control of what is taught in the architectural schools and universities or the engineering, but we know that they all have to be part of the solution as well.
Let me answer that a little differently, John.
Well,
the answer is no. We don't, and we don't do that well. But what I can say is that under other projects we have underway with construction labor relations and with the Canadian, or with both with the Canadian building trades, but also with the BC building trades, is that we're trying to, here at Skill Plan, convince them to allow us to rewrite their better supervision program so that we can talk about those components. We're trying to do that with a different approach. And I think that as we move Building It Green to another level, and we seek additional funding to do our phase 2 piece on top of what we do with this project, we're going to include those components in part of our proposal. We know that supervisors will drive that. We know that supervisors make the difference. We know that supervisors will give agency and respect, but it really is not being taught very well. It's generally the highest producing individual on a construction site that has no skill sets, no people gets selected as the supervisor. He's the biggest, should I say this? He's the biggest asshole around. And that's who gets elevated.
Aaron, I think we have enough time for one more question. I also got a question for you in the chat if you'd like that as well.
Yeah, sure.
From Janet, will raising climate literacy in broader society also put pressure on management to rise to the occasion when it comes to standards in workplace? And for Karen, are there needs from management to aid in retention? Can we all manage projects better for all workers?
Yeah, actually, I'll jump in. And actually, this kind of going to the question before from Cody too, is that it does need, like when it comes to setting workplace culture, when it comes to whether it's talking about climate literacy or whether it's talking about bullying, harassment, and discrimination, it does have to come from the top down, as well as setting standards from the bottom up. And so I think that working with, and a lot of what we do at BCCWITT too, is working with managers, working with site supervisors, working with union reps, and different levels of in the workplace to kind of really provide that training about what is a respectful workplace, how to set that tone, how to intervene, how to make sure that there aren't instances of bullying, harassment, and discrimination, as well as being able to take that training and bring it to every worker on the work site so they all take ownership and responsibility for setting that tone. But it does have to come from the top down, as well as have a standard that comes from the bottom up. And I think too that there is a change happening in the industry when it comes to especially younger workers coming onto work sites. I think that they have different standards of what they want to see in a workplace. I don't think they're likely to put up with things that maybe other people did in the past, but it does have to come down to the managers and site supervisors, because they do set the tone, and they are the ones ultimately that are responsible for instances of workplace bullying, harassment, and discrimination, for example. So that will make a huge difference when it comes to retention, but also when it comes to attracting workers. Because once an employer has a bad reputation, it gets out there as well, and people will be less likely to want to work there. So again, one of the programs that we believe is really successful, and I know a few people on this call are probably familiar with it, is our Be More Than the Bystander program, which is just really aimed at setting that workplace cultural tone to create those safe, healthy, respectful, and inclusive workplaces, and making everybody on a work site responsible for that workplace conduct.
I agree.
Well said.
Thank you, Karen. We're almost at time, so I'm going to pass it over to Janet and Stefan. But before I do, I just wanted to ask John and Lee, I've had a question if the report is public and if I can share a link with people as a follow-up. I'm also happy to send the deck out to everybody that registered for the Zoom as well.
So I think you should send the deck out at this stage. Anything that's public right now can be found on the BC or the Canadian Building Trade Union's webpage. So
Right.
Building and Green's got a known file in regards to that. I think a lot more information will be public after our April conference this year. That's when we'll be delivering it to the building trades across Canada. So not that it's super secret. We're out doing this work. It's good work. We want people to know we're doing this work. Share that deck, and if there's more presentations people want John and I to come and do, we love to talk about this.
Fantastic.
Hard to shut us up.
No, it's great information. And I will just put a plug in. We're going to continue this conversation at Buildex with the coalition. We're doing a panel on the green building boom and how we attract and retain workers. And we'll be back in touch as being said about the next lunch and learn as well. But Janet and Stefan, can I hand the mic over?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And I just want to say a few words of thanks before turning it over to Janet to close out the session here. So I'm Stefan von Suchowski. For anyone on the call I've not met, President of the Vancouver and District Labor Council, and just really want to say thanks so much to Lee and to John for being here today, coming and sharing about the work that they're doing and their expertise around the importance of apprenticeship and the connection of that to the work we need to do to advance a just transition in our economy. And also to Karen as well for joining us and sharing your expertise and knowledge in this area as well, and your insights as well in the questions that you posed. So thanks so much to all three of you for being part of the session today, and for everyone else as well who attended. Thanks for joining us on your lunch hour today, and looking forward to seeing you again at another one in the new year. Over to you, Janet.
Yeah, and I'll just finish off by thanking everyone who came, thanking John, Lee, and Karen, and also Andrew for hosting these. I want to thank partners, our folks at New Westminster District Labor Council, Stefan at Vancouver District Labor Council, and Andrew at the Sustainable Workforce Coalition, and also the Vancouver Economic Commission. So I think this session has really spoken to the importance of raising climate literacy, both in the broader society and also in certain trades and in the workforce. So This is really timely and really appreciate everything, and hope folks enjoyed their lunch, and there'll be more to this conversation coming up. So watch on the socials and our Facebook for more information. Oh, and I just will finish with one thing. Just wanted to mark that today is December 6th. This is the anniversary. It's the final of the 16 days of action against gender-based violence, and it is the unfortunate anniversary of the massacre in 1989 of 14 women engineering students at Laval Polytechnique, and also others who were injured studying, but attacked because they were women. And I think this conversation on this day really speaks to the importance of inclusion in the trades and being aware of gender-based violence in our communities. And so we mark that day as well. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Just kick my ankle right in the leg.
Awesome.